Yeah, so one of the major barriers is really the readiness of infrastructure between the shore and the ship, which has a requirement of the demand side, the ship side, and the land side, the supply side, really need to come and have a lot more conversation. So aggregated demand is going to be very important so that it can justify the installation and investment of infrastructure side. And this is a big gap, and I don't think enough discussion is happening as an aggregate of demand. Different companies, shipping companies are having individual conversations, but I think more can be done so that there's more certainty in the investment to infrastructure. Yeah, so we have 4 initiatives that GCMD is looking at. Enabling ammonia as a marine fuel, right? Building an assurance framework really around the drop-in fuel scenario. So one of our first test cases is using biofuels. And then we also want to see how we can enable the carbon value chain. And lastly, we want to try and accelerate the deployment of energy efficiency technologies. So these are the 4 initiatives we're focusing on. Traditionally, new fuel will need to have infrastructure for bunkering. So there's no ammonia bunkering vessel, for example. Understanding the safety requirements is going to be critical if you want to accelerate the use of ammonia. Similarly, for drop-in fuel, there needs to be an assurance framework to make sure that there's no greenwashing and things like that. So how sure are you that the biofuel you're using is actually going to serve the purpose of carbon emission reduction? The carbon value chain, on the other hand, is just not about looking at the capture on board ship, but the entire value chain needs to be ready. So how do you offload? And are the ports ready to take it? And then where does the carbon go? Does it go into sequestration or utilization? These are very important things. And the last one on energy efficiency, it's a no-brainer, but yet there's a lot of structural issues in terms of how do you finance just the energy efficiency system, and that's why we're piloting the PACE project this year, and we released a white paper a month ago. So these are the kind of things we're trying to help deploy solutions at scale. Well, I think the challenge of industry stakeholders when they're just looking at their own space, right? They're trying to address themselves, and maritime stakeholders need to look beyond maritime, right? Because the production of fuels, for example, is outside the maritime sector. And so how do you then bring sectoral stakeholder engagement around the table? And this is where everyone needs to decide, like, how do we make it work for the ecosystem and not just for that particular segment of the ecosystem? So an ecosystem approach where there's a lot more collaboration, so you know what upstream requirements are, what the downstream requirements are. These ecosystems must come together. So ultimately, for us to effectively decarbonize at scale and at pace, we need a systems of systems approach to everything we do and not just looking at in an isolated manner. Think out of the box. Don't think the old business models are going to take you to the new world. We need to start thinking differently. And there's this idea in renewables called the NIMBY effect, not in my backyard. The NIMPL effect is not in my P&L, right? So everyone's P&L, whether it's the consumer or the supplier or the transporter, needs to have a relook, right? That is just not about return on investments, but what can we do for the environment? So the return on the environment is going to be very important as well. So we need to start thinking differently if we want to accelerate decarbonization. Otherwise, we'll be trying to do the same thing and achieve different results, and it's not going to work.